Rebel base in range.
You may fire when ready.
Commence primary ignition.
I think, first of all, the thing that we really aspire to constantly is quality.
Attack me with all your strength.
The best parts about Star Wars is there is no good or evil. It depends on what side you're standing on, truly. You know what I mean?
What? Well, I think it's the storytelling is so primal. It's good versus evil, and it's very clear, even to the youngest viewer.
It's good against evil. It's George's homage to every film that he ever loved. George loves films, and that's what this film is about, is movies.
I'm really interested in Star Wars from the perspective of the bad guys.
What happens is no matter how you do it, when you sit down to write something, all of the influences you've had in your life come into play. The things that you like, the things that you've seen, the observations you made, that's ultimately what you work with when you're writing.
When I saw Frozen as a grown-ass woman, I cried through the entire movie. There was just something about the relationship between the sisters, the like de-villainization of the classic kind of fairy tale bad guy, you know, the concept of true love being between two sisters and not a heterosexual relationship. Like it just destroyed me completely. And
it's not necessarily what we lecture. I've discovered kids don't like lectures at all. But it is really the way we live our lives and what we do with our lives and the way we conduct ourselves.
She's a powerful leader. Yes. In a very woman-centered world, which I was very excited to kind of be in that, because I feel like Star Wars is very like patriarchal, so it was kind of cool to have like this sort of woman-centered figure.
Well, what appealed to me was that George Lucas, who wrote it and also directed it, didn't want a damsel in distress, didn't want your stereotypical princess, you know, sort of a victim, frightened, incapable of dealing with the situation without the guys. So he wanted a fighter. He wanted someone who was independent. And that's what appealed to me about that part, yeah.
And when Carrie came in, she was that character. She was very strong, very smart, very funny, very bold, very tough. You know, there really wasn't much of a question. There are not very many like her. You know, they're 1 in a billion.
What was so wild about this show and my experience coming onto it was Leslye and Lucasfilm had already developed the show around me before I even had my first meeting.
Curious.
I thought, well, where most mythology takes place in a distant place. So I said, well, the only place that's left really is outer space. I mean, it's the only place where we don't know what's there. And where it can be magical.
you know, these actually female-driven warrior films where the fights are, for lack of a better term, musical numbers. I mean, you know, like they're a way to physicalize how everyone feels. So really the fight sequences and the action in our show is just another aspect of the characters externalizing what they're going through emotionally. So Frozen and Kill Bill have a lot in common. I'm just trying to explain.
One of the reasons why I made Star Wars is it's made for 12-year-olds. It appeals to everybody, but it was still made for 12-year-olds.
We were all 12 once.
And I tell people, don't underestimate 12-year-olds. They're smarter than the rest of us.
Right.
They get stuff much faster than you do.
Yeah.
I don't read anything. My wife just gives me the weather report.
But if you can't look and see that Anakin blowing up the Death Star possibly killed millions and millions of people.
Idiots! Star Wars is always about rebels versus institutional threat, right? Underdogs versus huge empire, right?
You know, the psychology of developing fantasies is a very interesting and delicate thing. I've come across people that have no imaginations at all.
So if we said it then the Jedi become the antagonists. Not the bad guys, but they become the bad guys to the bad guys.
Well, I was shocked the first time I came across it. And because I just assumed everybody had an imagination.
And I gotta say, Kathy really responded to that. She really felt like that was a pocket of the universe that we had not seen, that nobody else had pitched her.
And it is interesting because I have a huge number of men who call me constantly and tell me how much of a Star Wars fan they are and how much they want to get involved in anything to do with Star Wars, I don't have a lot of women who call and have those conversations with me.
In the beginning, you hire somebody because of their work.
When you're hiring a director, that everyone is sitting in there waiting for George Lucas and not for the person who's going to know to hire Ralph McQuarrie, that's the problem. That's the misogyny and the problem with the auteur myth as it stands today.
I'd seen some of his paintings and I thought he was really brilliant. I had said, look, I want you to do some paintings of these scenes that I've done so that the studio can get a picture of what it is I'm talking about. And met him. He was a very sweet guy, easy to get along with. And with combination of those things, I said, let's go.
Well, Anakin just killed a whole Death Star. How many people died on that?
What? I've made movies with very young people that have no track record. So I have to kind of go through and discover them, pick them, and then test them and go through them and have readings. And so it takes a long time. I spent probably 6 or 7 months casting Star Wars, and that's a long process to sit in a little room and interview people. And I interviewed thousands of people.
I had I had one idea for every role and I got every single person. There was no casting process. I wanted Amandla, I wanted JJ, I wanted Manny. Manny especially, I was like, I have no other ideas. So it's got to be Manny Jacinto.
All too easy.
I'd taken the proposal to a couple of studios, and they had turned it down, completely confused by it. Robots and Wookiees, they couldn't read it and say, I understand what this is all about. Science fiction was not something that did well at the box office. On top of that, it was aimed at young people, and most of the studios said, look, Disney does that. The rest of us can't do that.
This is the truth, is that when I pitched it, because I came in and I pitched my own idea, I didn't come in and say, like, what about baby Han Solo? You know what I mean? Like,
the Star Wars saga is his baby, and he knows it better than anybody else knows it.
I worried about the fact that I'd never been behind a camera. I had no idea how to put a crew together. I didn't know anything about filmmaking, but I just said yes.
I mean, it took me years to get my first film off the ground, and as I talk to film students now, especially, I say the easiest job you'll ever get is to try to make your first film, because that's the easy one to get, is the first film, because nobody knows whether you can make a film or not.
And I really, if there are anytime young filmmakers, especially young women, ask me, if I want to become a filmmaker, what do I do?
Guys, leave us.
I'm always like, when that happens, say yes. Don't say, I don't know how to make a movie, because men don't say that.
I didn't know anything about making movies. I was an anthropology major and was interested in photography, was interested in going to art school, but my father wouldn't have anything to do with it. So I figured there would be some photography in the School of Cinematography, which is what it was, School of Cinema. And I didn't even realize you could go to school to learn how to make movies.
Dudes roll out of film school, throw on a Spielberg hat, and go, I know everything that I'm doing.
Worked 3-4 years to get from my first film to my second film, of banging on doors, trying to get people to give me a chance, writing, struggling with no money in the bank, working as an editor on the side, working as a cameraman on the side, getting little jobs, eking out a living, trying to stay alive.
even the truth is, like, we are so spoiled now with Star Wars media.
And when we started the first film, I investigated all of the optical houses and special effects people and realized there was nobody around and no company around that could really do things that I wanted to do in that picture. So I realized that I was going to have to start a company and put together a whole group of people that would just be specifically for making Star Wars.
And the reality is that you can do it. Like, you just have to have the confidence to walk in there and pretend like you know how to do it.
First 2 weeks of shooting, we'd run into a lot of weather problems. The sets had blown down. I didn't get everything shot. It was a disaster. At that point, I was pretty depressed, saying, boy, I've got myself in way over my head. I don't know what I'm going to do.
I'm telling you guys, like, the truth. Like, that's how I made my first film, was that I was like, I know what's going on. I didn't at all. And I think it shows in the movie.
Good idea.
Up on my way home, flying from LA to San Francisco, thinking, oh my God, this isn't going to work.
this is a mess, and you'll never get to work again. And I was having severe chest pains. They took me to the hospital because they thought I might be having a heart attack. They said, have you been under a lot of pressure? I said, yeah. They said, well, that's probably that. Take some aspirin, call us in the morning. But of course, everybody else was panicked. What if I died? People don't even know what the movie is.
But I got to make my first one, which helped me to make my second one. And the second one will help me make the third one. And then I stopped because they won't let women make more than 3.
Leslye was incredible, and she is incredible at this in every one of her projects, at collaborating with the people that are involved. At least, and I can only speak from our aspect, but such a brilliant job at bringing us on and allowing us to find our own voices and our own connections to the characters, which I just think breathes life into a performance in a very specific and detailed way.
Like, take credit, but like stand on their shoulders.
I think George likes people. I think George is a warm-hearted person, but he's a little impatient with the process of acting, of finding something, and he thinks it's there. It's right there. I wrote it down, Just do that. Sometimes you can't just do that and make it work.
Doesn't lock. Doesn't lock, is it?
The reality is that Star Wars in and of itself is not just a vast universe full of many different characters, many different eras, but it is always about the spiritual journey of what it is to become who you are.
And when you've seen a picture, it connects with you in a particular kind of way. A good novel operates, again, you have this little voice going on, you're saying, this has something to do with me in my life. Art is a very human thing because it relates, I think, to the issues of beauty, and not just visual beauty, but intellectual beauty.
You really don't need to know anything to watch our show. So I hope that it will excite Star Wars fans and feel faithful to what already exists. But I also hope that it invites new fans and indoctrinates them into what I love.
Yeah, I basically set out to make a modern fairy tale. And
good guys, bad guys.
Yeah.
And teach you how to live.
And it's not a teaching as much as it is you get a sense of it rather than a direct, thou shalt not. It's much more of a, I don't think I will.
Like, yes, I'm brutal. Yes, I just did something unforgivable, but you brought her here. You recruit children and you train them and you bring them into situations that they shouldn't be in. And now you're mad at me? Just putting it out there that possibly. So he ended up being essentially very anti-establishment, which is obviously what the rebels are and the resistance is in Star Wars normally. But once I locked into like, oh right, he's the voice of the counterculture of this era.
Because I think the core issues that I'm dealing with are, if they were valid 2,000 years ago, they've got to still be valid today, even though they're not in fashion.
Why are they out of fashion?
Because I think it's harder. The world we live in is more complex, and I think that a lot of those moralities have gotten to be grayed to the point where they don't exist anymore.
You have to understand that the Jedi are not the Jedi that they are in the prequels. They're not the Jedi that they are, pre and post Battle of Yavin. Like they're in a different space where they're operating with less oversight, number one, and they're also operating with, I think, a little more hubris. Like, of course, we're doing the right thing. We're doing the right thing. This is how we've always done it, and that's the right thing.
But those issues are still there in most people's minds. The importance of, say, friendship and loyalty. Most people look at that and say, how corny. But, the issues of friendship and loyalty are very, very important to the way we live our lives. But it's not common knowledge among young people. They're still learning. They're still picking up ideas. They're still using these ideas to shape the way they're going to conduct their life. And you need to tell the same story over and over again every generation so that generation gets it. And I think we've gone for a few generations where a lot of the sort of more basic stories have fallen by the wayside.
What I was interested in examining were the Sith, master-apprentice dynamic.
If the apprentice is craving the master's power, then at some point he must recruit his apprentice to overthrow the master.
Yes.
I mean, you got the dark side, the light side. One is selfless, one is selfish. And you want to keep them in balance. What happens when you go to the dark side is it goes out of balance, and then you get really selfish and you forget about everybody, and you ultimately lead yourself, because when you get selfish, you get stuff, or you want stuff. And when you want stuff and you get stuff, then you are afraid somebody's going to take it away from you. Whether it's a person or a thing or a particular pleasure, experience. Once you become afraid that somebody's going to take it away from you, or you're going to lose it, then you start to become angry, especially if you're losing it. And that anger leads to hate. And hate leads to suffering. Mostly on the part of the person who's selfish, because you spend all your time being afraid of losing everything you've got instead of actually living.
You're going to see two sides of almost every character. Almost every character has two sides, as we know. I mean, that's all what all Star Wars is about, right? Like, there's light and dark in everybody, and it's all about the balance of that. And in my opinion, the High Republic is a world that's out of balance. It's that there's just too many Jedi, and they may be balanced individually, but their power is not.
And if you go to the side of light, you will be happy. Because compassion, helping other people, not thinking about yourself, thinking about others, that gives you a joy that you can't get any other way. Being selfish, following your pleasures, always entertaining yourself with pleasure and buying things and doing stuff, you're always going to be unhappy. You'll never get to the point. You get this little instant shot of pleasure, but it goes away, and then you're stuck where you were before. And the more you do it, the worse it gets. You finally get everything you want, and you're miserable because there's nothing at the end of that road. Whereas if you are compassionate and you get to the end of the road, you've helped so many people. I mean, you know, some of the speakers have gotten up here. When you think about the thousands of people you may have helped, you may have stopped from suffering and everything, that gives you a very warm feeling. Anyway, I've gone way over my time, but thank you very much.
The idea that like that only came from George Lucas, that only George Lucas holds the key for what we understand to be Star Wars is just untrue. And I think the prequels are an excellent example of that.
The main thing is to protect these characters, make sure that they still continue to live in the way that you created them, and that the universe of Star Wars continues to grow. You could actually blog about what we're doing and how we're messing things up.
No. Hopefully it'll be an inspiring package of entertainment that it has always been well into the future.
And then here you come. And you did it. You did it. You understood the assignment.
I can't watch anymore.